Dell Technologies provides growing businesses with tools to do incredible things because we believe there's an innovator in all of us. For advice on smart PCs powered by Intel V Pro that's built for business, call a Dell Technologies advisor at 310-DELL.
Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. A reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe, rate, review the show. I'm your host, Wim Liu, and today, in a reunion, I'm joined by Jessica Casciaro and Joe Wolfond of theScore's Pound the Rock podcast. What's up, guys?
Doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm always happy to have you guys in this studio. You know, people know that Pound the Rock was the three of us. We started it in, I think, 2018? 2019?
Yeah, 2018 playoffs, I think. 2018 playoffs. And then 2018-19 was the first full season Wolfond and I did it.
Right.
Yeah, man. Always great to have the original PTR trio back together.
The only thing missing is that Alex is actually sitting behind the glass instead of just chilling in the room with us. But, you know.
Yeah, he's a fan.
Yeah.
And now he's finessed his way into co-hosting and producing. I just remember some very engaging Pound the Rock episodes. A lot of Ben Simmons trade discussions, which I guess ultimately did come to a fruition eventually.
Yeah, not much has changed really, because
I guess so.
A few years ago on Pound the Rock, we talked about Ben Simmons' fraudulent on-court behavior and Kyrie Irving's fraudulent off-court behavior. So I guess nothing has changed in the 4 years since we started that show.
Yeah. We also had the episode where Kawhi was traded to the Raptors.
That's right.
And you guys did an emergency podcast, and I was the producer at the time. Unfortunately, I was in Algonquin Park, so I couldn't help you guys produce. So there was a lot of frantic, driving around to, various places that might have, a speck of internet, so I can email you guys the intro and the outro music.
We also we had a few shows like that. Like I was on the road in Houston when the Gasol trade went down.
That was the last episode
I did that remotely while you guys were doing trade deadline stuff.
Yeah, someone was driving on the highway, and we recorded an episode when LeBron signed with the Lakers too. I remember.
I think that was me. Yeah, good times.
Point is, we were all extremely committed to the show.
Yes, and it continues. It continues, man. I still. I love hearing the horns and stuff like that in the intro music. Anyway, so listen, I was obviously following along and listening to the latest episode of Pound the Rock. You got this great discussion about who are the second-tier teams in the Eastern Conference. I think we can all agree that the Bucks are firmly ahead. They've dropped a couple of games, but realistically, the Bucks are championship favorites and stuff like that. You guys had in the second tier of the Eastern Conference the Celtics, the Cavaliers, and the Raptors. And then you guys give your reasons for each, and I'm probably going to ask you guys to repeat them here. But I'm really happy to hear the Raptors were in it. But I'm also kind of if there's one team in that tier 2 that's closer to tier 3, I'd probably pick the Raptors. So, Wolfond, we'll start with you. What have you seen from? I mean, I think the Celtics is more self-explanatory. They're a really good team, and obviously they made the finals last year. What have you seen from the new look Cavaliers that sort of thrust them into the second tier of the Eastern Conference so far?
I mean, this is a team that we saw last year could be absolutely elite defensively. Their front court with Mobley and Jared Allen, both of those guys can protect the hell out of the rim, but they can also play out on the perimeter. They're able to cover for each other. So usually it's going to be Mobley, the guy who's playing further away from the basket. But point is that having two guys like that just allows you to be extremely scheme versatile. If you want to switch one of those guys out, you can switch them out and still trust that you have one of them on the back line to protect the basket. If you want to, play a zone where you're keeping both of them on the back line, you can even, they'll play a zone sometimes where Mobley is out there, he's one of the two in a 2-3. They can hard hedge and recover. There's just a lot of different things that they allow you to do. So we know that they have the capability to be an elite defensive team. Offense was where they really struggled last year. They go out in the offseason and get, one of the premier offensive engines in basketball who proved, obviously, that he could keep them afloat and then some with Darius Garland out. And Garland was a guy, he carried their offense last year.
Yeah.
one of the most gifted playmakers in basketball, along with being just like an unbelievable shooter off of the dribble or off of the catch. So Mitchell steps in, carries the offense when Garland's out, and Garland comes back, and then you see how well those two guys can play off of each other, where I think they're both great on the ball. They're both great off of the ball, too.
Mm-hmm.
And in a very short amount of time, I think they figured out how to play really effectively together. But, I mean, the real benefit, I think, is you're always just going to have one of them on the floor at all times. Like last year,
there's no drop off. Their
offense completely cratered when Garland hit the bench. And now when he hits the bench, you've got Donovan Mitchell there to pick up the slack.
Yeah. I guess it makes a lot of sense. And I actually want to have a bigger discussion about Donovan Mitchell as well. But we'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I mean, when you assess sort of the second tier, like Cash, the Raptors making it into the second tier for you guys, you know, that's impressive because you have teams like Miami out there. Obviously, they're not doing great this season, but, you know, they made it to Game 7 of the conference finals, and then Jimmy Butler pulled up for that shot, which I'm not mad at him for, but in retrospect, wasn't the greatest shot, but whatever. Philadelphia, who beat the Raptors in the playoffs, and then Chicago, who, you know, I mean, maybe I'm being too generous putting them in tier 3 almost, but
yeah, I think they're more like I mean, it depends how many tiers we've got, but I think they're more like tier 4, maybe even tier 5 by the time. It also depends how quickly they get Lonzo back. Like if he ends up missing the whole season, that lowers their ceiling.
Yeah,
for sure. I think there is a floor there with them where they can, you know, they'll be a 500-ish team and be fine. But in terms of getting into the mix where like maybe they can actually win a playoff series, I still don't think they have enough.
Right. But yeah, what is separating the Raptors above them? Like what are the Raptors doing better than some of these teams to be in that second tier for you guys?
I think for one, and maybe it sounds crazy given what we've seen from Miami before, given the fact that Philly's got Joel Embiid back there protecting the rim, but I do think there is a different type of defensive ceiling with the Raptors than there is with those teams because the Raptors don't have any defensive weak spots, really. I mean, you can maybe haggle about Gary on his worst days, but I do think on his like he does enough, even though he gambles sometimes, I do think he does enough on the perimeter more often than not, that he's not the kind of weak spot you would usually assume. Like most teams have deplorable defenders somewhere. Even good teams have someone you can pick on. The Raptors don't really have that. And the balance of that defense and the ceiling that they have defensively, and especially now, I mean, I don't know how much we want to talk about Koloko today, but especially finding that 7-footer. Yeah, he's a rookie, but the ability to now have a real 7-foot plus with a crazy wingspan guy protecting the rim and the freedom that allows their very gifted perimeter defenders, OG among them, to do things on the perimeter. I think on balance, they have the highest defensive ceiling of those three teams. And I think Pascal's, elevation into another tier of star, especially as an offensive creator, which, I mean, we were already seeing that last year, but the ability to start the season like that this year. I know, obviously, now there's the bump in the road with his groin injury, but I do think Pascal being what he is now and the defensive ceiling the Raptors have actually does put them, a smidge above Philly and Miami, which, again, people listening might think that's crazy because of the presence of Joel Embiid and what we've seen the Heat do already in the playoffs. But I do think, on balance, the Raps have an edge over those teams.
Yeah, I think that's where I am too. But I'm mostly asking this question because, like, it is notable that the Raptors split games with all these teams, right? They even lost to Brooklyn, for example, which in retrospect, not ideal, but still.
The one thing I'd counter to that is, like, I've said it so much too already early this season. It is going to be hard. I don't care who it is. Like, it's going to be hard for teams to sweep these mini series when the two teams playing are both good teams. Like, I don't care whether they're home and away or both at home.
That's fair.
Like, there's a big difference between playing your two home games against Philly, for example, months apart, where maybe Philly's had a home game against you in between there as well. Like, there's a big difference between that and playing them twice in 3 days with no travel between, where it is more like a mini playoff series. Like, it's hard to beat good teams 2 times in 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So I do think, like, the fact that they've split with Philly both at home, splitting with Miami on the road, you can argue is actually a win, right? Like,
yeah, I agree.
Again, Chicago was a home and home. Siakam didn't play the second game. Levine was back. I'm not putting too much stock in the fact that they split and didn't sweep any of those, because I think for the most part, when two good teams get together twice in 2 or 3 nights, there's going to be splits more often than not.
I would also say that I think it's very possible that over the course of the season, Philly gets their act together and jumps up into that tier. I think there's a chance Atlanta could jump up into that tier. I think we were sort of basing it on what we've seen so far this season. I just think the Raptors have looked a lot more impressive. than those other teams so far. But I kind of think Miami is cooked as a contender. Like, I just think their most important players are. I think Jimmy is still really, really good, and Kyle can still be really good on the right night, but the consistency isn't there with him anymore. And I think the ages of their most important players and the limitations of their young players that are kind of supposed to pick up the slack just has me worried about their ability to actually stay in that tier. Like, I think Hero and Adebayo, like, those are the young guys for them that are supposed to, like, give them upward mobility moving forward. And again, kind of pick up the slack when we see some decline from Jimmy and Kyle. And I just don't really think we've seen much of that. They look like the exact same players to me with the exact same limitations. Bam on offense and Hero on defense. And, like, they lose PJ Tucker for nothing and didn't really address that spot.
Right.
You know, like, the power forward position is a bit of a concern for them. Backup center, I think, is a concern for them. So I don't know. I know, like, they've proven me wrong before, but they don't register to me as a team that's going to be a serious threat in the East. And we said that coming into the season.
Yeah.
To me, it's just, like, I think the defensive ceiling with the Raptors is super high. And there are obviously some offensive limitations there.
Yep.
But I think their ability to paper over those limitations with their style of play, with their speed and their athleticism and their relentlessness, I think there's just overall a little bit more two-way balance there with them than there is with a team like Philadelphia, a team like Chicago, even though Chicago somehow is like a top 5 defense right now.
Yeah, that doesn't feel right. They just look very, like, gettable. Like, you can go at Vucevic, go at DeMar.
Yeah.
Zach LaVine's not healthy.
Yeah, it is nuts, though, how much of a team impact Alex Caruso can have on a defense as a guard.
Yeah,
he's
like,
insane.
It's nuts.
Even the other night, there were so many times that him just being on Scotty Barnes dissuaded the Raptors from getting the ball to Scotty, even though you would look at that matchup and be like, huge size mismatch, get the ball to Scotty, go at him. But there's a reason NBA teams choose not to go at Alex Caruso, because he's a really good defender. And I think the key to that Chicago defense is his presence. Just like last season, they had a very surprisingly decent, not even decent, good defense. And then when Caruso went down, they slid to bottom 10 on that end. Yeah. So I definitely think his impact is something to behold and something that flies under the radar, frankly.
For sure. And I think, like, he doesn't really play enough minutes, I don't think, to be in consideration just because of his offensive limitations. But if he were playing like 7 or 8 more minutes a game, I think he would have a genuine case to be in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation. Because to be a guard who is raising the floor for your team's defense that much is unbelievably hard to do. Right. And he does it, starting alongside 3 minus defenders. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Lakers essentially chose Kendrick Nunn over him, though.
Oh, boy. What are the Lakers now, 2-8?
Yeah.
I feel like it's so sad. I mean, whatever. We'll get to this later. But
Knicks West, baby. Knicks West.
So
the New York Knicks with palm trees is what the Los Angeles Lakers are.
They're like, the reports are like, AD might be available. I'm like, I hope so. Like, like I wouldn't be super married to anybody here, to be honest. But I guess, when Westbrook is like the positive storyline now for the season, it's a little tough. Okay, yeah. So, I'm thinking about the Raptors and the tiers. And most importantly, I think, Cleveland making that jump into that second tier has really got me thinking, and obviously they've been really successful this year. And it's like, wait, hold on. So didn't the Raptors also show some interest in Donovan Mitchell? And I think I want to kind of come back to this because, full disclosure, like when the Raptors were involved, and, this is what Sham said on July 25th, along with New York, several other teams have expressed interest to the Jazz when it comes to Mitchell, such as Washington, Miami, Toronto, Charlotte, Sacramento, and Atlanta, according to sources. Interesting that Cleveland wasn't in that mix of half of the Eastern Conference. But in any case, the Raptors did show some cursory level of interest. And of course, with all Raptors topics, this show will cover on it. And I kind of just brushed it off. I'm like, I don't know. The big prize is KD right now. I'm not really trying to hear about Donovan Mitchell. And then you see this happen, and you see Mitchell right now averaging 31 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists on 52% shooting from the field, 45% from 3, 86% from the free throw line. He's one of the most efficient one-on-one players in the league. He's also been really good in the pick and roll. Kind of just being the major propelling factor behind Cleveland's, they were already really good defensively. Now they're really good offensively as well. Why didn't the Raptors get in the mix for Donovan Mitchell like that?
Well, for one, I mean, I don't know whether they did or didn't. Like, maybe they did, and for whatever reason, they ended up thinking the asking price was too much.
You heard a lot more smoke for KD than you did for him.
And given what Mitchell ended up going for, I would, think it's crazy that any team thought that asking price was too much. I mean, and to your point about KD being like the shining gift that everyone thought he was going to be in the offseason, or a goal that everyone wanted in the offseason, you know, shameless plug for theScore's YouTube channel. But yeah. I did a video last summer for our Unfiltered series about how when you looked at the asking price, the reported asking price for Kevin Durant versus the reported asking price for Donovan Mitchell, when you looked at where each player was in their careers, took everything into account, that I made the argument that trading for Donovan Mitchell would leave you better off than trading for Kevin Durant. A lot of people disagreed with that. I got a lot of hate for it in the YouTube comments, which I guess, I mean, never read the comments. But still, the point of it was that people found it so hard to believe that trading for Donovan Mitchell was actually the better route to success. But it was because, again, like, it's not even to say that he's better than Kevin Durant right now, but even though I think that is an argument to be had, given the way the season started, it's more so when you take everything into account, like what you would have had to gut your team, the level you would have had to gut your team to get Kevin Durant versus the price Mitchell ended up being available for. Again, like we're talking about a guy that was at the time 25, 26 when the trade rumors first started, in the middle of his 20s, a all-star player, a superstar level offensive player in his mid-20s with multiple years left of team control. Like, do you know how insanely rare it is for a guy like that to be available? It's rare enough for a guy like KD to be available with multiple years left of team control, but trading for Kevin Durant, in addition to gutting your team, also would have meant being willing to pay him approximately $197 million for his age 34 to 37 seasons. Big difference between what you were getting there and what you were getting with Mitchell. I think it's nuts, whether it was the Raptors or any other team. I think it's absolutely nuts if anyone thought the asking price for him was too high when he ends up going from Markkanen, although I know Markkanen's playing well in Utah, but still, to go for what Markkanen was at the time, Sexton, the guy that Cleveland drafted with their first-round pick this past year, right? Yeah. And then 2 picks and 3 pick swaps or vice versa. It is steep, but it is not too much for a player of Donovan Mitchell's caliber who is a consistent carrier. And Wolfond's talked about this a lot on our podcast as well, the engine of consistently elite offenses.
Yeah, so to answer the question, I guess, of why didn't they get into that mix, I mean, maybe they watched the playoffs last year and
that's fair.
Decided a player that defensively inept or at least defensively apathetic just doesn't fit the vision. Cash and I both kind of, I think, campaigned for them to make a good faith effort to go after him. I don't know what the package would have been, what that would have looked like from the Raptors side, because you really have no idea how other teams around the league are going to value.
Sure.
You know, so like. But
I mean, look, this is what the Cavs ultimately paid. Colin Sexton, who was a restricted free agent, right? Lauri Markkanen, who was under contract. Ochai Agbaji, who I think was 16th pick, and then 3 unprotected first-round picks to the Jazz. The Raptors had enough players on their team that you have to think, like, let's say OG, Gary, and 3 picks. Like, it wasn't in a situation where you need to give up Pascal. You wouldn't have given up Fred, and you probably wouldn't have given up Barnes, because if it would have been one of those things where it's like, give us Barnes or nothing else, it's like, well, they would have gotten Mobley out of Cleveland then. Because they're probably equivalent value. So it did seem like one of those deals where for KD, you probably have to give up everything. This was like 80% of everything. It was doable. I think it's like within the Raptors had the means to get it done.
Yeah, and I think, like, I mean, you can make arguments on either side of it. I would have been excited for them to have gotten him because I think as much as, yeah, maybe he doesn't fit the vision of what they're seemingly building to a T, but you also have to be adaptable, right? Like when a player like that becomes available, you can't just say, well, no, he's not, you know, this super long, defensive menace, and maybe we're going to have to change some things about how we play. But you could also look at him and say, well, this guy is really, really good at pretty much everything that we're not good at.
Yeah.
Individual shot creation, pick and roll ball handling, pull-up shooting. I mean, and I think you can see some maybe downstream effects of that where, yeah, you probably have to change the way that you defend, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like right now, I feel a little bit like the Raptors are boxed into playing this hyper-aggressive defensive style, having to gamble for steals because they need to generate turnovers to fuel their transition offense because their half-court offense is very bad. And so maybe you have a Donovan Mitchell-type offensive creator, and you no longer feel compelled to have to play like that all the time. I know they'll probably still want to play aggressive ball pressuring defense because, as Nick Nurse has said, on this show before. That's just his coaching philosophy. He believes that that's how you should play defense. But I think you would have to do it or you would be able to do it a little bit more selectively and not out of necessity in the same way that they're doing it now. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this. And I don't know, maybe they took all this into consideration. Maybe they made a genuine offer and the Jazz just said no because they saw this breakout coming from Lauri Markkanen. But
maybe they watched Eurobasket, bro. He was doing this for Finland.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot of different things, I guess, that they could have considered, but I think it would have been very worthwhile to go after him for all of those reasons.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about Donovan Mitchell being the engine of consistently elite offenses. For all of the improvements that we've seen from the Raptors and for all of the reasons we even have them in Tier 2 in the East, you know where they rank still in half-court efficiency?
I think 27th.
26th, I think, as of this morning. So bottom 5. As good as they've been, as improved as they look, as improved as Pascal Siakam's been. Now, granted, I guess you can make the argument some of that has to do with the fact Siakam and Fred haven't played together enough because they've both been hurt and in and out of the lineup, but still, you should be better than 26th in half-court efficiency.
Yeah, that's like tanking territory. Like the Houston Rockets are probably in that area.
And Donovan Mitchell is a one-man wrecking crew in those situations. Like, you have Donovan Mitchell, I don't care who the 4 guys around him are, you're going to be better than 26th in half-court efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I mean, it's not like it would have been a complete slam dunk because I think you would have thought about in the offseason priorities were, okay, how do we get Barnes more involved offensively so you can take the next step, right? You bring in a guy that's, I think what Mitchell's usage is probably 30% right now. It's probably been historically between 28 and 30%. Takes a lot of shots away from other guys. Pascal's making this leap. Fred, obviously, he's already taken a step back. Probably would have taken an even bigger step back with Mitchell. But again, these are things that, these are good problems.
Right.
You have a lot of contributors on offense at that point. A little bit more scoring. You have a guard for the Raptors who can drive all the way downhill and score at the rim, which hasn't happened since DeMar.
And I think there are ways you can get creative too. Like if they had brought in a player like Mitchell, does that take away from Scotty's usage and touches? For sure it does, but you can get creative. Maybe that means Scotty runs the bench lineups. Like, there are ways that you can rejig the rotation and the touches in a way so that guys still get their opportunities, right?
Use Scotty as a roll man. I mean, he has a great skill set to be an excellent short roller, right? Between the playmaking, the push shot, and the Raptors don't really use him that way because they kind of can't, because they don't have. I mean, Fred has pull up gravity, but like you mentioned with Mitchell, there's a different element of downhill explosiveness and ability to get all the way to the basket that Fred doesn't really bring you.
Yeah, he'll dunk on you.
And
sometimes hoop is very simple. He will dunk on you. You gotta have to really respect that. Whereas Fred's gonna.
So you can, to Cash's point, I think you can think about what that might unlock, right? Suddenly, hey, maybe that's a role that you see Scotty Barnes playing a lot more often, where you're having him actually be a ball screener, and you're unlocking his short roll skill set in a way that you're not really doing right now. And that's I'm not in any way doubting that this is the kind of creative thinking that the Raptors front office isn't doing. I'm sure they're constantly considering all of this stuff. But I think more in terms of just saying, oh, well, Donovan Mitchell's a small guard who doesn't really defend all that well, so he doesn't fit the vision, is a very narrow-minded way of looking at something like that from a fan's perspective.
I mean, it would have been a bit of a small backcourt, and I think that with Cleveland, they're more willing to do a small backcourt because it's not like Garland's any bigger than Fred. But they're more willing to do it because they have those 2 elite rim protectors in combination. And to be honest with Mitchell, he's been very blessed. I mean, I don't think he's ever played without rim protection behind him. To go from Gobert to then, Mount Mobley what's that nickname? I mean, they have is that what they call him in Cleveland?
They have some sort of nickname in there for him, but
something like that for the 2 of them with Allen and Mobley. You do see.
I think they call him Frobley, right?
Frobley?
Yeah.
I kind of like that.
That's not bad.
That's better. Cleveland had some pretty good nicknames. Shout out to Sexland.
I was going to say, it's better than Sexland.
R.I.P. Sexland.
Yeah, seriously. Although there's a new nickname for a new duo in Utah as well, but I'm going to just tell you that during the break. Involving a former Toronto Raptor. But yeah, no, seriously. I think what Mitchell work as well defensively in Toronto, given the fact that they don't have the same kind of rim protectors. I mean, with all due respect to Christian Koloko, it's not it's no Frobley.
Right. Well, I mean, that's where you kind of get into talking about downstream effects again, where okay, so you make that move, and then maybe you need to make a subsequent move to shore up the back line of your defense because you're going to be a little bit more porous at the point of attack. And yeah, so if that had led to them also trying to swing a trade for Jakob Poeltl, I wouldn't complain about it. But yeah, there's a lot obviously to consider when you're thinking about making a move of that magnitude.
Yeah.
And I can understand the reasons why they might have shied away from it.
I think the Raptors also like their team. It was like, like they had such a good start last year to this like rebuild thing, and it's like they just kind of want to see it go one more year. And I get it. It wasn't like Donovan Mitchell was like playing this well last season. Although
offensively he was. I mean, I think that there was more defensive concern about him, especially in the playoffs. That I think his effort on that end has kind of quelled some of that concern to start the year. But I also think it's like, we do spend so much time talking about the deficiencies with the Raps, or maybe why they can't quite compete for a title yet, or why they should have traded for Donovan Mitchell. I do think it's important to remember, like, all that being said, they're right there with Cleveland, with the team that did just trade for Donovan Mitchell, right? Like, so they're by no means in a bad spot. To your point, too, about them liking the way the rebuild is going right now, I completely understand why they do, because they have been able to blend these kind of two, I wouldn't even call them separate timelines, because it's not like Fred and Pascal are old by any means, but they've been able to blend these two somewhat different timelines of guys that are very ready to win now, and guys like, a Scotty coming up who will take the franchise into a next era when those guys are gone. But that is very much still part of the plans with those guys right now. It's hard to do that, win and develop. They've managed to do it. So is it disappointing that Donovan Mitchell ended up on a conference rival? For sure. But it's also somewhat impressive that conference rival is barely better than the Raptors right now, if at all, to be honest.
And that's the thing, too. They have gone all in. Cleveland has, as have most teams in the top half of the Eastern Conference. The Raptors are still the one team that has like bullets left in the chamber kind of thing. You have contracts on the team that you can move. You have all your picks moving forward. Like, there is an advantage there. But this discussion about Frobley and Cleveland also got me thinking about another player who might be in the Defensive Player of the Year race. See, this is it's called a transition. A hard one.
In the radio biz.
A hard transition here. No, but seriously, I was listening to the pod, and you guys were talking about OG Anunoby and how great he's been defensively. And Wolfond, you said that he has a legitimate case so far based on what he's played as a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And then you go on like NBA.com and they put up those, like, I guess they used to do just the MVP ladder, but they do Defensive Player of the Year ladder now. But I think he was third, OG, on that list behind like Marcus Smart and Giannis, who are both guys who have won it before. So, yeah, I mean, Wolfond, walk us through the OG Anunoby Defensive Player of the Year case.
What I was saying to Cash on the podcast, I don't need to tell the listeners that OG is an amazing defender, right?
Oh, but they love to hear it, though. You understand. This is a propaganda program. Please indulge.
All right, so
this is Raptors State Media.
If we're talking about like why I think you could argue that he should have been in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation in seasons past. Like 2019-20 to me was before this season like his best defensive season, and for him to have not even made an all-defensive team that year.
Well, there was just too many great defenders, Wolfond. You don't understand.
I don't want to.
What are you going to pick all the Raptors for Defensive Player or none of them? Clearly none.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So it's not that he didn't necessarily have a case in the past, but I do think he's leveled up a little bit this season. And I think, interestingly, like part of maybe why he hasn't gotten his due as a defensive player over the last couple of years is because the Raptors' defensive scheme doesn't really showcase the thing that he does best. Like his forte is being a man-to-man defender and maybe being better than anybody else in the NBA at doing that. And like Nick Nurse's Raptors don't really like to let anybody defend one-on-one, right? So it's
okay, yeah.
And this is not to say that OG's not a good team defender, by any means, but I think it's fair to say like that's not necessarily his specialty. And so the Raptors scheme over the last few years has kind of been almost preventing him from accessing the thing that he does best. I think he's been a good team defender in the past. I think he's become a great team defender this season where, you see the steal numbers, right?
Leading the league.
And in the past, like he would rack up, I think he's probably topped out at like 1.5 per game.
Probably, yeah.
And now he's up over 3. So
no one's averaged three in a season in 32 years, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Didn't Larry Hughes do it like sometime?
Might not have qualified.
Oh wow, what a deep cut.
Might not have qualified.
You look that up while I make this point. Anyway,
make sure you filter for qualified players though.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay, so in the past, like the vast majority of OG's steals would be he was picking off those point to wing passes, right? Like shooting the gap, coming off a pin down and jumping those. And like those are really valuable steals. Like the steals that happen at the top of the floor are so valuable because they're that much more likely to lead to runouts the other way and like pick sixes. And he's still doing that a bunch, but I think what we're seeing him do more of is like the kind of low man work along the baseline where like he's getting steals and blocks as like, you know, with like backline rotations essentially in a way that I don't think he was really doing in the past. Like the one that really sticks out in my mind is in the Dallas game where he was guarding Spencer Dinwiddie in the corner, who's not like a not dangerous shooter.
Sure.
But he is like helping way off. He's got basically both feet in the paint. And Doncic is running a pick and roll with, I think, Dwight Powell. And so I think part of that is he trusts his speed and his length and his ability to make that closeout if it comes to that. Part of it also is like scheme. And we know like the Raptors, if there's a shot they're willing to give up, it's the corner three. They're basically giving up the highest rate of corner threes in NBA history right now.
Well, when you double at the 35-foot mark away from your hoop, you're probably going to give up some corner threes where passes usually end up.
But Luka does like a very Luka thing, which is he gathers like just below the free throw line, looks directly at Dinwiddie in the corner before throwing the lob up to Powell. Mm-hmm. And OG is like completely unmoved by this, right? Like he doesn't take a false step.
As he is by most things.
Exactly. He doesn't take a step in that direction. He doesn't lunge. He doesn't lurch. He just stays right there. Again, maybe trusting his ability. Like if the ball goes out there, I have the speed and the length to at least make this a difficult shot. He stays where he is and he picks off the lob. And like I think as that kind of backline defender, as a low man rotator, like those are the kind of things that he's doing better than I feel like he ever has.
Right.
And that's leading to more defensive playmaking from him, where like he's been an exceptional defender in the past, but one who almost like rather than necessarily always creating plays on defense, he's like preventing them. Like his ball denial and like forcing guys to give up the ball, or just forcing like top scorers to like not even run plays essentially because they don't want to go at him one-on-one. He's been an elite like event preventer in the past, and now he's showing that he can be an elite event creator on defense as well.
Yeah, and I think a big part of it too is that the Raptors defense is better this year. Like as a whole, that'll help him get, whether it's defensive player of the year love or all defensive team love. He should have been getting that love already. And the Raptors ended up with a good defense by the end of the year last year. But to start last season, if you remember, their defense wasn't good. And this year, they've at least started the season with their defensive performance tracking with their defensive potential, right? It's caught up. Whereas like to start last year, it was all about what they could be defensively, and they weren't actually getting it done the first month or so. And so the fact that they've come out the gates defending like this as a team with him doing what he usually does and then some, that's obviously going to bolster his case, right? If you're talking about him being the best defensive player in the league or one of the 4 best defensive forwards, which he obviously is.
Yeah. And then, okay, on top of that, like I mentioned the help stuff that's improved, but I also think he's just been straight up more aggressive on the ball.
Yes. Yeah.
And like I don't know if that's him deciding to do that or like the organizational edict that like, no, we need to create as many turnovers as possible so we can get out and run. But he's swiping at like constantly, right? And you see that reflected in his foul rate, which I'm pretty sure is the highest of his career right now. So there are like some downsides to that.
Yeah, the 3.6 right now per game. Previous high was 2.7.
Yeah, so he's taking more risks and he's getting more aggressive with his hands when he's guarding on the ball, and that's led to just a lot more on-ball steals for him as well. So I think he's just doing it in every way. Like he's doing it on the ball, he's doing it off the ball, he's doing it at the top of the floor, he's doing it at the bottom of the floor. Like he has become like just an all-encompassing, extremely versatile defender who can succeed in like pretty much any context.
You know, I'm thinking about it from the Raptors perspective, and it's been interesting to me to hear OG's teammates openly say that, like, you know what, you have this kind of potential to be defensive player of the year. It almost makes me think that, like, you know, when you think about last season and the rhythm of it, OG was featured a lot offensively when Pascal was out. Then he came back in. Then he got banged up. Then Scottie really emerged. And then it was like OG some nights would be the 5th option, right? Then you see some reports in the offseason. I mean, whatever. OG's distanced himself from the reports. He just says in his classic way, he's like, oh, I can't control this. Like, I don't know. You can. You could just tweet out something, but whatever. I guess not. but he's distanced himself. But I mean, the reports were that he wanted a bigger role, and that other teams are interested in him. All this kind of stuff, and ultimately he stays, right? And to be honest, his role offensively doesn't even look that much more improved. And you know what? I'm almost okay with that because I just don't want to see turnovers on drives every 5th possession. But also at the same time, it's like it seems like the team has really gotten him to buy into this idea that like, hey, you want the next? You're probably thinking of the next deal like 99% of NBA players, right? Basically, everyone except Udonis has him. I don't think UD's thinking about the next deal, but
because he knows it's going to be there.
I guess so. Yeah.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, he's but how do you get there? Well, if you win Defensive Player of the Year, pretty much every Defensive Player of the Year is going to make something really, really nice. Like close-ish to the max, things like that. I guess Smart would probably be the exception.
Well, the interesting thing, and again, I'm obviously not. OG wouldn't get this kind of money, but the interesting thing, because everything is timing in this industry, is that he's a free agent in 2024, correct?
Yes, he can opt out. Yeah,
right.
After next season.
We're having this conversation about him winning Defensive Player of the Year right now. I know it's early, but still, if this was a year from now and we're having this conversation and he were to win Defensive Player of the Year in the year immediately preceding him entering free agency as a guy with, at that point, 7+ years of service.
And the cap jumping?
He would technically, at that point, be Supermax eligible of like 35% of the cap. Again,
right, of course, he's not going to make that.
Of course, I'm not saying, but the point is like, it's kind of nuts that we're even having that conversation with OG. Like, that he could be hitting qualifiers to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But in terms of the offense, the thing I'd say is I'm fine with it like you are, because as I've said before, actually, I think I said it the last time I was on with Alex, is that everyone was like wanting this jump from OG offensively, or him to get more touches and him to, be a second option off or whatever it was. And I've been saying the whole time, it's like, man, if he is what he is defensively and hits his ceiling defensively, which this year he's doing, while just being continuing to be a good 3-point shooter and a guy who, like, when need be or when the situation calls for it, when there's a mismatch, you can throw the ball down to him and he can play bully ball because he often has a strength mismatch. If he is all those things, that is more than okay. That makes him one of the better players in the league. That makes him a well above, like, if you're talking being one of, if not the best defensive player in the league, the best on-ball defender in the league, a good 3-point shooter, and someone who can at least bully a mismatch on offense, at that point, it's like, that's like, what more do you want? Not everyone can be a straight-up offensive star, and OG's not built to be one, and that's okay. Like, what he is right now is really darn good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and some of that is like, you can get your own offense, when you mug people at half court and then run it in for dunks. Like, that's what we saw on Sunday's win against Chicago was, it was a close game, and then OG stole the ball off DeMar twice, and those were huge momentum-shifting plays. And also, most importantly, the Raptors were able to build a cushion that the Bulls couldn't overcome.
You can make the argument that's the Raptors team motto, like, to a man, other than one or two guys who can really consistently create for themselves. You can argue that their motto is, hey, it's hard to be an offensive star, but if we steal the ball and go back the other way in transition, it's easier to score.
Yeah, and I mean, look, that's the thing. It's like a steal is kind of the most valuable play in basketball, right? Because if you look at the Raptors right now are scoring 1.5 points per possession off of live ball turnovers.
Yeah.
So you're not only taking a possession away from your opponent,
right,
but you're then turning it into like a 1.5 point per possession proposition going the other way. And so, like, that's basically, I mean, like, what does the average offensive possession
like one,
produce?
Maybe.
That's a 2.5 point swing, you know? And, like, obviously there are, like we talk about, like the fouling and then gambling and missing and getting out of position and how that can compromise your defense. So it's like,
you have Koloko back there now. You could do a little bit more. Yeah.
The point is, it's not like a risk-free proposition to just try and steal the ball all the time. But especially with OG, I mean, he's just able to recover and get back into a play and still impact that play after potentially, like, whiffing on a gamble in a way that somebody like, say Gary Trent Jr. is not. Like, I think that's part of what makes him such a special defender is, like, he can take risks, he can gamble, and still not really get burned for it.
Yeah. Just to wrap up this conversation, Larry Hughes averaged 2.9.
No qualified player has averaged 3 steals per game in a season since I think it's like 91, and I'm assuming it was probably Rodman.
Really?
Maybe? Or no, I know, Rodman, I guess, was
maybe Gary Payne.
MJ did it in the 80s for sure.
Okay, so maybe it was MJ in 91. But it's been, I think what I saw was it's been 32 years.
Yeah, no, it was a great season for Larry Hughes. averaged 22 points, 6.3 rebounds, 4.7 assists, 2.9 steals on a team for the Wizards that won 47 games along with Gilbert Arenas and Anton Jameson. Those are pretty good teams until Gilbert did what he did.
Yeah, but those Wizards teams were always kind of paper tigers, and also they had a lot of injury issues. Like, talk about fraud alert. If we were doing Pound the Rock in the late 2000, like 2007, 8 type of time, we would have been labeling the frauds, putting the fraud label on those.
Was that still a Grunfeld era?
That was still Grunfeld.
That was still the Ernie Grunfeld era. Oh man, I mean, I don't think we don't have another hour to do here because
you're not gonna put some respect on Brendan Haywood.
Come on,
who was I think their center.
Come on,
Kwame Brown was still there. Yeah, no, the rest of the team was not great. Shout out one time to Michael Ruffin as well. Every Raptor fan knows what that is. But okay, look, we got to take a break. But thank you both, Cash and Wolfond, for coming on. Check out Pound the Rock. You know, it's close to my heart. And yeah, for me, I'm gonna take a quick break. When we come back, Alex will be here to do the Make or Miss segment because I ran out of time with you guys. And yeah, in the meantime, you'll be listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Liu. I'm joined in the second segment by Alex Wong, producer, co-host, all that stuff. Just like in the old Pound the Rock, when diehard Pound the Rock listeners knew that you were 6-man off the bench. You, John Chick, YL, we had a bench.
Chico,
Was Chico ever on?
John Mattis.
He does hockey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Devang.
He does soccer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Their names are.
No, that's literally the
Shout out
name.
to Brandale eating a burrito back there. I was hanging out in the first segment.
Yeah. How'd you like just
So-
being in part of the audience?
Not to beg, do you mind getting me a burrito after maybe, before the game?
Where did he get it from?
From Fat Bastard Burrito.
Oh,
Yeah.
across the street. Okay, yeah, we
Yeah.
can get that. Yeah.
Okay.
I
I just want you to buy me lunch today. I don't know why.
I got you, man.
Okay.
I mean, usually I get you lunch at the arena in an unspecified way.
Oh, brother. Happy hump day. What's
Happy
going
hump
on,
day.
man?
Okay, so yeah,
What
so
you need
I
from
ran
me?
I ran out of time with Cash and Wolfond for this, but in the usual tradition of Pound the Rock, we usually finish the show with make or miss, which
Okay.
I will read out a statement and then you either say make or miss
So quick hitters.
in terms of whether you agree or
We're running out of time, brother.
Okay, all right. First one, make or miss. Last year, not this season, was the Warriors' last dance.
A miss.
Really?
Yeah, the Warriors will get it together, and also
Really? They need the officials to look the other way on a very blatant foul.
Oh,
so
we'll
they
get
can
to
beat
that.
the Sacramento Kings.
it helped
man.
me hit a 3-game parlay the other night.
Oh, okay.
But
You were like, yes.
yeah, I was like, that was a make. No, miss. It's very early in the season, and the Warriors, the rookies, not the rookies, the young guys have been very disappointing. Their bench has been terrible. It seems like they made all the mistakes letting guys like Gary Payton Jr. and Otto Porter go. But it's very early. They can make a move if they want. And worst case scenario, they go to the Nick Nurse plan and just play their starters 39 minutes.
I don't know, man. Those guys are old, and they've had injury histories, and they played a lot of postseason basketball. It's not the same. Like it's easier
Listen,
for Nick Nurse to do it because
That's a miss for me. I really like this segment, though, because we're going to need to ration content coming up because the Raptors have very few games
Oh, okay.
the next couple weeks. So let's definitely reuse this segment.
Okay, all right.
I like this. Okay, miss. What's next?
Next statement. All right,
Yeah.
make or miss. The Raptors dodged the bullet not re-signing Kawhi to a 5-year deal.
Ah, man, why you put me on the spot like this?
I mean,
Can it be a 4-bounce miss?
I'm just saying, Kawhi. I mean, his status is very TBD.
You know what? No. I disagree with that. So that would be a miss. that would be a miss for me because even though he's going through injuries now, the Raptors would have at least won another championship and possibly have competed for a 3-peat. Because Kawhi was healthy when he went to the Clippers. I know the injuries is now now he's out for an indefinite period of time, but the Raptors would have repeated and that would have elevated the franchise even more.
Okay, that's fair enough. Fair enough. Kawhi, by the way, has yet to play. How many plays? He's played 111 games for the Clippers in 4 seasons.
Yeah,
and they don't have a championship or a conference.
The Raptors would have won in the bubble, and they would have been going for a 3-peat.
You would have been happy with that. Okay, that's fair.
Yes.
Next statement: the Blazers have the best vibes in the NBA.
Make so Jeremy Grant.
Oh brother.
Oh brother. One of the Grant brothers hit a game winner, even though he traveled.
Did I pronounce his name right?
Against the Phoenix Suns. And then Josh Hart had, shouts to your friend Josh Hart as well.
That's right.
Yes, the vibes are immaculate in Portland. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. Like, certain teams just have that, like, team of destiny type vibe. I'm not saying they're going to go all the way to the championship, but it seems like coming off such a dark year last year with Dame's injury, the rebuild, and, like, moving different parts, trading CJ McCollum. I think the Blazers are going to be a top 6 team in the West. And I think, that's a successful season for them.
Yeah. It's really funny because
Jeremy Grant?
It's Jeremy Grant. He's playing great, 18 points per game, shooting 48% from the field. It's funny because the Blazers used to always be this team that would, be like pretty competitive in the regular season, but then flame out in the playoffs, which I feel like they're destined to do again this year.
They will, but
like they've reset expectations, so now people are happy with getting what they used to.
As long as there's no Dame Lillard, is Dame Lillard leaving rumors? That's a successful season.
That's right. That's right.
So.
All right, last make or mix before we get to our last segment. The Timberwolves trading for Rudy Gobert was a huge mistake.
Nah, miss. It's too early, man. I saw the stat. So they got the worst starting lineup in the league right now.
Okay, I mean, that's
Anthony
tough,
Edwards
man.
is calling the team soft. You can clearly see the chemistry is not there. Chris Finch is a good coach. There's too much talent there. They're going to figure it out.
Okay.
Man. They're going to figure it out.
All right.
But, I mean, I would revisit this in like a year or two, because if they're just flaming out in the first round, or they're just a play-in team, meanwhile like Utah's collecting all these assets while being the number 1 seed in the West at the moment, yes, then it is a huge miss. But right now, it's too early.
All right.
It's too early for me. There's too much talent there. You don't think they're going to get it together?
I think they're getting to figure out a whole new way to play.
A whole new game.
It's a whole new game. Well, speaking of which, Alex?
Speaking of which, it's now time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game.
All right.
The Toronto Raptors are hosting the Houston Rockets tonight. They are a 10-point favorite at home. As everybody knows, Pascal Siakam remains out. Who are you taking tonight, Will, and why?
Man, 10 points is a lot of points.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Raptors should win this game, but 10 is
10 at home, though? 10 at home again against a rebuilding team. You know, this is their last home game before they go out on a mini road trip. You would expect, you know, and we also saw last year, and I don't know how much the Rockets have improved, probably not much.
Not much, no.
They were unable to figure out how to break a full court press.
Yes, there's a video that I put together where
Their names are.
There's literally 9 possessions in a row where they, not in a row, but sequentially where they couldn't break a full court press.
Listen, I know people might be on the fence because of Pascal's injury. You're not sure, you know, which Raptors team might show up, but I still think there's a talent discrepancy, and there's just an overall discrepancy between the Raptors and the Rockets. There's a 7-point teaser option, as I always mention. So if you like to tease the Raptors down to -3 and put them in a parlay, that would be my recommendation. Also want to tell you a fun gambling story, if such exists.
It definitely exists.
So the other night I actually did a 3-game parlay because my friend John Ing was really going through it. Man. I believe he took the Orlando Magic, and that didn't really work out. Sorry there,
betting
John.
for diapers right now.
So I teased the Dallas Mavericks. So I teased 3 games by. You want to know how how tough it is sometimes on these bets? Kevin Durant made 62 straight free throws until he missed one in the final seconds. And that's how the Mavericks won. So I covered that one. And as many people saw, Kevin Huerter of the Kings was going for a game-tying 3 attempt at the buzzer, and Klay Thompson fouled him. They came out in the last 2-minute report and said that they missed the call.
I mean,
the Warriors ended up winning by 3, so I had them at -3, so I pushed that and won my other 2 bets.
Wow.
And the Utah Jazz, of course, blew out the Lakers.
And now I have to buy you lunch? I feel like it should be the other way around at this point.
I don't want to bring up the fact that you asked me if I knew who Matt Ryan was on the Lakers at the start of this of the Raptors Show season. So I think you owe me $5.
Okay, I'll get
but
you
I think
a
a burrito
burrito
is probably $22 now in today's economy.
Okay. Well, anyway,
anyways, take the lesson here is I think take the Raptors.
Yes.
I'm confident in the Raptors -10.
Okay.
If you're not, put them in a teaser. I like Milwaukee and Memphis tonight on the road. Milwaukee's at OKC. Memphis is at San Antonio.
Giannis and Drew Holiday are downgraded to out.
I still like Milwaukee.
Oh, okay.
I still like Milwaukee.
Fair enough.
You gotta trust the organizational culture.
Yeah. Fair enough. You gotta trust the tank. All right. That was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game, and that does it for us today. I'm your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. Reminder, we're streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. Thanks once again to Joseph Casciaro and Joe Wolfond. Thanks to our board producer, Derek Brandeo. Shouts to Alex for stepping in for a quick 10-minute segment. Thanks to Jennifer Rolnick for helping us with the YouTube stream, and we'll be back tomorrow